The CPS confirms that it's authorised the Metropolitan Police to charge Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon with 2 offences of harassment causing fear of violence. And separately, Keir Starmer's doing a bit of a U-turn. More about that a little bit later. But first, the CPS news, which whilst I'm going to this, please do bop the like button and subscribe to the channel. That really does help my channel grow and I really appreciate it. But going to this news, the first thing that I'm going to say is sort of doubling up what I'm going to say because this even mentions it twice. So this is really important. The CPS News website here reminds, as it always does, all concerned, everybody watching this, everybody that knows about the news, that criminal proceedings against him are active and that he's got the right to a fair trial. And it again says, even to the media further down, I'm not the media, but I am a commentator, so this would apply to me too, but I'm sort of my own advice here. It says the media should take their own legal advice about reporting on these matters. There's a very good reason for that, and it applies not just to the media, but to the general public as well, because there is a strict liability rule in the Contempt of Court Act that if you do any publication, which includes any speech, writing, program, or anything else, communication in whatever form addressed to the public at large or a section of the public, the strict liability rule says that if it creates a substantial risk that the course of justice of the proceedings in question will be seriously impeded or prejudiced, you could be held in contempt of court. So this is my warning, not just to you watching this, but to any media establishments watching this as well. Not advice, it's a warning that you need to be careful about what you post about this. So for obvious reasons, I won't be saying any more about this specific case, save that I'll explain what these charges are to you. Completely separately and in no connection with his case whatsoever, I will explain what these are. Now, starting with the penalty for somebody who is convicted of these offences is quite steep. It has a maximum of 10 years custody and it's triable either way. So it could be in the magistrate's court or indeed it could be heard in the Crown Court. And this would be dependent on the magistrates accepting or declining jurisdiction or whether it's sent immediately to the Crown Court, depending on how severe the situation is and so on. And then the sentence is worked out at the end if someone is convicted on the usual culpability and harm scales. And we end up literally at a table here. So what is the offence and how does it come about? Well, any kind of harassment needs to be a course of conduct, which means at least 2 occasions it passes the criminal threshold to make it a course of conduct. And in Section 4 of the Protection from Harassment Act of 1997, this type of harassment is that which puts someone in fear of violence. So a person whose course of conduct, so it's at least 2 occasions it passes this threshold, that it puts somebody in fear that violence will be used against them, and then they are guilty of that offence. So either the person knows or they ought to know that that course of conduct will cause that other person to fear on each of those occasions that violence may be used against them. Of course, there is a defence available. There is a defence, statutory defence, to say that if a person under this section is so charged that they can say that their course of conduct was pursued for the purposes of preventing or detecting crime, or that the course of conduct was pursued under any enactment or rule of law, or that the pursuit of his course of conduct was reasonable for the protection of himself or another, or the protection of his or another's property. So all I can say about this particular situation is literally to read the news to you, and that is the offence with which he's been charged. The CPS confirms that he's been charged with 2 offences of harassment causing fear of violence against 2 men, both committed between the 5th of August 2024 and the 7th of August 2024. And separately, he faces trial on the 13th and 14th of October 2026 for failing to provide the PIN to his mobile phone under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Now again, separately, I've explained what that is without reference to his case specifically, because I can't and I won't comment on his case specifically for the reasons I've explained. But in other news, the BBC now reports that Keir Starmer says that it wants more pensioners to be eligible for the winter fuel allowance in a policy U-turn. Some people are saying that this is him trying to reassure Labour voters that he really is on their side after all. And let's take a look at what he previously said when he was in opposition and there was a rumbling about doing exactly what he's done with the winter fuel allowance. This is how he talked about it then, before he removed it.
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. His Paymaster General went a step further. he said these are the sorts of things that we need to look at. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
Of course, back then it was referred to as a £46 billion black hole. Then said that it was a huge surprise to get into power to find a £22 billion black hole. But by the by, that was him in opposition saying that they shouldn't remove the winter fuel allowance. Of course, then they did remove the winter fuel allowance. And now it's been saying that this is a U-turn to calm Labour's nerves. Chief political correspondent for the BBC, Henry Zeffman, said the details will follow in the budget this autumn, but make no mistake, this is a U-turn. The decision to means test the winter fuel allowance was one of the first announcements made by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves almost a year ago. It was intended to demonstrate both the dire state of the government's economic inheritance and the new regime's willingness to take tough decisions in response. It didn't quite turn out that way. Early grumblings from MPs, generally on the Labour left, rapidly spread into the more unexpected parts of the party. Even those MPs who made a decent fist of defending the policy right to the end admitted that it was the most frequently raised issue by members of the public when they were out campaigning. In other words, people were unhappy, lo and behold, that they were taking winter fuel payments off millions of pensioners. Now, this is not the first time that there's been grumblings of Labour members and MPs indeed turning against, or ostensibly turning against Keir Starmer for some of these policies, and this indeed feels a bit like a U-turn to me, and not the only U-turn we are seeing and maybe will see. I do have a sneaky suspicion that there's a lot of discussion going on about a lot of other things as well that we might see U-turns about. And there's quite a few different takes on the EU deal as well, which I talked about in my previous video. Let me know if you've watched that and what you think about that, because one way or another, that feels a bit like a U-turn on Brexit and feels like a bit like a Brexit betrayal. But is that really something that everybody wants? Or is it just the case that collectively people voted for Brexit and now I'm not being asked what they think? But one thing to clear up, which a lot of people have commented on that video, a couple of people have emailed me, and I see these comments floating in now and again. A lot of people have said, is this not legally binding, i.e. the Brexit referendum? Is it not legally binding? Can they not sue the government for going back on Brexit? Well, I've explained before that no, in fact, it was never legally binding. It was just a referendum. It was just a vote of the public, just a vote of a choice, just a vote to see what the public wanted. And even if it were binding on the government of the time, it's not binding on any future government. So it was never legally binding. It was not even binding on the government at the time. It's certainly not binding on the current government. And the one thing that one parliament cannot do is bind a future parliament. So one parliament can make up a law that everybody doesn't like, and a future parliament can just repeal that law and get rid of it, or recodify it, change it, and so on. But of course, and as usual, we will wait and see what actually happens. But I hope that is of some use to you. Very quick video for you. Please do like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.